So a couple weeks ago I did a review of Outlast on the PC, and it turns out that Outlast has a pretty sizable DLC called Whistleblower. I wasn't originally planning on doing a video on it, but one of my subscribers was nice enough to send me a copy on Steam. Thanks, CodeRad. Hope you enjoy the review. If you'll recall, Outlast began with Miles Upshur receiving an anonymous tip from an unnamed whistleblower who claims that horrible things are going down at a remote asylum. As you can probably imagine, the Whistleblower DLC is centered around this unsung hero who set the events of Outlast in motion. It takes place at the same facility and overlaps with the events of the main game. Since this is a DLC review and I've never really done one of these, I'm going to mix up the video format a little bit. First, I'm going to show you some stuff that I liked about the add-on, then I'll show you some stuff that rubbed me the wrong way, and lastly, I'll explain whether I think it's worth adding to Outlast. I would say there's quite a few things that I did like about this add-on, and the main one is that it managed to keep the same frantic and claustrophobic tone while still introducing some fresh segments that we didn't get from the main game. There's a prison, a kitchen with boiling blood in it, a fog outer world, and whatever the fuck that is, holy shit. Now that I think of it, this DLC is actually more disturbing and morbid than the original campaign. Just look at this. One thing quite a few people commented about on my Outlast review was the abundance of jump scares in the game. And personally, I don't really like jump scares that much, they kinda get annoying, but like most filmmaking tropes, there is certainly a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. For the most part, I personally think Outlast did it the right way, and the DLC is no exception, but it seems to me that the DLC was less heavy on jump scares. In fact, there were a few subtle moments that sent shivers down my spine and reminded me of games like Silent Hill. Take this scene, for example. I enter this room with a patient curled up in a ball on the floor. He seems pretty tame, so I start moving this obstacle so I can open the door, and as I'm moving it, I see this figure slowly walk into my vision and just stand there. That is downright beautiful. Another thing you might remember from my Outlast review is the fact that my character just slams doors by default. Well, I'm proud to say that in Whistleblower, the character closes doors quietly by default. It's kinda strange that this had to be remedied in the DLC, but better late than never, I guess. Here's where things get a little complicated. Most of my issues with this DLC stem from problems that were carried over from Outlast and became more grating now that I have to play the game for another 5 or 6 hours. There are things I genuinely find irritating about Outlast that became much more apparent after they were repeated again and again with this DLC. Simply put, Outlast has some glaring issues that I could easily overlook the first time around, but not through the course of this DLC necessarily. For example, the enemy AI is pretty bad. I briefly mentioned this in my Outlast review, but it goes much deeper than that. In Whistleblower, there's this really cool insane cannibal guy that chases you throughout the first half of the game. He wields some kinda makeshift power saw and constantly raves about wanting to eat you alive. At first glance, it seems like this guy has a lot of character and is kind of an interesting enemy, but watch what he does when he finds you hiding in a locker. Yeah, just like every other enemy in the goddamn game, he grabs you, pulls you out, and throws you on the ground. Wouldn't it have been cool if he were to just saw right through the locker and pull out your intestines or some shit? It just seems like every enemy has the same cookie-cutter moveset. They become very uninteresting after a while. Plus, most of the enemies that we encounter in the game don't even pay off. That cannibal guy, he disappears halfway through and we never see him again. At all. This guy never becomes anything interesting, the Cannibal Twins get maybe 10 minutes of screen time, Chris Walker makes an extremely brief cameo, and Trager is dead by the time you get to him. You know, in many respects, this DLC has kinda made Outlast into a haunted house ride or something. Scary shit pops up, the character runs and hides for a second, And then nothing happens. No serious character building, lackluster narrative, and the protagonist... I don't even know a damn thing about this guy other than his name and where he went to college. So what can you take away from this? Well, as a horror add-on, it's really not that bad. It's thrilling, it's pretty fucking scary, and the atmosphere is just as good, if not better, than the core game. But it's nothing incredibly special. I loved Outlast for the most part, but Whistleblower is an old dog with a few new tricks. I'm glad I played it, but it wasn't nearly as enjoyable as the first time I played Outlast. If you've got some spare cash on Steam, and you really like Outlast, you probably won't be disappointed with Whistleblower. Just know that it has a lot of the same issues that Outlast had, and some segments in the later part of the game might start feeling tired, repetitive, or boring. Until next time, I'm the Investigamer, never trust the crowd, only... the investigation.